Hello everyone, it's Abby here from the Blue Barnette with instructions on how to complete this lemon DIY kit that you received in the mail. When you receive your package in the mail, it's going to be in a box like this. The first thing that you're going to want to do is open this box and empty all the contents. Once you empty everything out, this is what you should have. 3 blocks, 1 already painted and framed, paint pods, 1 marked G for glue, a sponge, a brush, a Q-tip, white paint, various laser pieces, and 2 stencils. I separated my laser pieces into their corresponding projects just to be more organized. These stencils that you have in your box are both unused, so they're both going to be clear. Now the first thing we're going to do is do the white base coat on these 2 blocks using this brush and this white paint. So everything else you can move out of the way. When we paint these blocks, we're going to do the front, back, and the sides. It's important to remember to achieve full coverage, we want to do several light coats rather than one heavy coat. I like to start by doing the sides and front of each piece. You'll notice when you're painting the edges that this is raw wood, so it's going to soak up the most amount of paint. You only need to do 1 coat on the edges. This is 1 coat on the sides and front of these. There is going to be some dry time, but just be patient. When it's no longer glossy, you can flip these over and paint the reverse side as well. This is personal preference, but because this is the back, it doesn't have to be quite as perfect as the front, so I'm okay with doing 1 coat on the back. Once this is less glossy, I will flip it over and do 1 final coat on the front. While the blocks dry, you can get your laser pieces out and put those in front of you. I didn't include a paper plate in the box, but if you have one or something that you could put paint on, it's going to come in handy now to dump out your paint pods right onto the plate. All of the pieces that you see here are going to be yellow, with the exception of the top of these lemons, which has a green stem. You're going to be painting these pieces with this makeup sponge. I like to hold it by the pointy end and use this flat end to dab the color on. A side note, when determining what side is the front and back, the front is always going to be a little bit cleaner as opposed to the back, which will have a lot more charred marks. It's a lot easier for the paint to cover the clean side rather than try to paint over all of these marks. So now I'm just going to quickly do all of these pieces yellow minus the stem, just 1 coat for now. From far away, these don't look bad, but up close you can tell that they definitely need another coat or 2. So I'm going to do another coat now. This is 1 coat versus 2 coats. Kind of hard to tell in the video, but in real life, the one on the right is just so much more vibrant with that 2nd coat. Now, I find that things look more realistic when there are multiple shades of yellow instead of just 1 solid color. So now I'm going to do a little bit of shading where I'm just going to add some white to my sponge and just do kind of like this right side. When you have the heaviest amount of paint on your sponge, that's when you want to do the side farthest to the right. As there gets to be less and less paint on your sponge, that's when you move toward the center and it'll give you that seamless transition. Now I'm going to do the same thing for all of these lemons. It honestly doesn't matter if you choose to do the lighter yellow on the right or the left-hand side. You just want to be consistent. So if you're doing the right side on this one, you want to make sure you do the right side on all of these. Last but not least, you have this half lemon wedge. I want to keep this rind the darker yellow, and I'm going to make these pieces just a little bit lighter using some white. I know it's difficult to tell in the video, but when you look up close, you can see the difference in those 2 color yellows. Now we're going to move on to dab all of these stems green. You're going to use the same sponge, even though it has yellow on it. It actually looks more natural with the yellow. Now that all these lemons are complete, we can move on to the stenciling. First, we're going to stencil this big lemon with the Easy Peasy Lemon Squeezy stencil. When I'm stenciling, I'm just going to hold this down, but if you prefer, you can put a couple pieces of tape on here. You might just have to cut the stencil a little bit smaller in order for the tape to fit on the lemon. The number one key to stenciling is to make sure you're using a very, very light amount of paint. I honestly cannot stress that enough. If you just think about it logically, if you're just gobbing on paint, it's going to sneak underneath the stencil, and that's what's going to make it blobby. If you use the light amount of paint, that's what's going to give you those crisp, clean lines. So again, you have a second makeup sponge, so you're going to use that to stencil, and again, hold it by this pointy end and use this flat end to dab. So when I dip my sponge into this white, I never want to go right from the paint to the stencil. I want to unload some of the paint, whether it's on my paper plate or paper towel or anything, and then you can go in and start lightly dabbing. You're going to notice that the stencil will bounce. If you're using light amount of paint, even if it bounces, it's not going to sneak under there. So just make sure you are holding it down and just lightly dab. One thing to keep in mind is a lot of times we're so focused on the inside lettering itself that we forget not to go outside of this stencil, like at the top or at the bottom, and then you'll get paint on this lemon. So again, if you have tape, it will come in handy because you can just cover that whole thing up and not have to worry about it. To help you get a better idea of how much paint to use, it should not be glossy at all. I can actually go in and touch this. I just painted this, and I'm not going to get any paint on my hands. It's like powdery looking almost. That's the amount of paint you want. And so the big reveal when I take this off, and you don't have to wait for it to dry. You can take it right off. And there is my stencil. Now we're going to do the same thing for this summer stencil. So I have all my lemons lined up. And then I'm just going to start by doing the S, and then remove that, and then the U, and then remove that, all the way down the line. You just want to make sure that you are trying to get these in the same spot on each lemon, so right in the middle, because when they're all lined up, you don't want it looking like up and down and up and down. Now the final step is going to be to glue all of these down on the blocks. So I'm going to start by just taking all of these and placing them on the blocks without glue, just to make sure the spacing is how I like it. Once I have it laid out like I'd like it, I can grab the pod labeled G, that's your glue, and this Q-tip. You want to keep these pieces on here while you're gluing just to maintain that layout. So I'm going to start with the first lemon, put the glue on, set it down, and then move on to the next one. When you're applying this glue, you can apply it pretty liberally, and then when you set it on there, don't push down because you don't want it to seep out of the outsides. So just set it there and let the glue do its thing. And now your project is complete. You want to make sure that you give it about 5 minutes to dry fully before you tip it upright, otherwise the pieces may slide. Thank you guys so much for buying this DIY kit and watching this tutorial. I hope you had so much fun making it, and stay tuned for next month when I'll be posting another project. As always, we really appreciate your business, and so does my family. Have a good one.